Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here because we're about to completely shatter a pretty common misconception. You know, when we hear the word ancient, it is super easy to just unconsciously picture something, well, primitive. We kind of default to imagining rough, crude, maybe unorganized beginnings. But what if I told you that over 4,000 years ago, human beings were literally living in meticulously planned grid cities? And not just that, they were producing art with such incredible refinement that it honestly rivals modern craftsmanship. So today, we're taking a virtual museum tour right through the arts of the Indus Valley Civilization. We're going to look really closely at their creations, and I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to see our ancient ancestors in a completely new light.
To really appreciate what we're looking at, let's anchor ourselves in time for a second. We're traveling way back to the second half of the 3rd millennium BCE. So, around 2500 BCE marks the real emergence of this civilization's artistic golden age. This high period of creation thrived right up until about 1900 BCE. But take a look at the present day on the far right. As you're going to see, some of the wildly complex artistic and engineering techniques pioneered back in this ancient era didn't just vanish. They actually represent an unbroken, continuous tradition that is literally still actively practiced in parts of India today.
So here is our museum map for today. We'll start with the artists themselves, move through mastery in stone and the bronze casting tradition, check out terracotta art, try deciphering the seals, and finally look at everyday art.
All right, first stop, Section 1. The Indus Valley Artists, creators of planned cities.
These artists, living in major hubs like Harappa and Mohenjodaro, clearly possessed incredibly fine artistic sensibilities. I mean, they had vivid imaginations that perfectly captured unique anatomical details. But, they didn't exist in a vacuum. The Indus Valley Civilization actually showcases some of the very earliest examples of civic planning in all of human history. We're talking cities organized in deliberate grid-like patterns. They had distinct houses, bustling markets, dedicated storage facilities and offices, public baths, and a highly developed drainage system. The structured, analytical minds required to engineer a city with complex drainage, those are the exact same minds that brought such meticulous, careful modeling to their artwork. Their civic order literally paved the way for their artistic refinement.
Moving on to Section 2, Mastery in Stone, Rare and Refined.
Now, while stone statuaries from this era are surprisingly actually quite rare, the pieces we do have are exceptionally refined. They are absolute textbook examples of how to handle three-dimensional volume. Take this famous bust of a bearded man, for instance. It's carved entirely out of soapstone, and archaeologists widely interpret him as a priest. Just look at the sheer character captured here. His half-closed, elongated eyes perfectly capture this state of deep meditative concentration. His nose is well-formed, he's got a neatly trimmed mustache, a short beard, and his hair is meticulously parted in the middle with a plain woven fillet passed right around the head. It's an incredibly specific, individualized portrait.
But here's the kicker. It's not just the face, it's the details of his garment. Notice the shawl draped under his right arm, covering his left shoulder. It's decorated with these very specific, three-dimensional trefoil patterns. A trefoil is basically a graphic form made up of the outline of 3 overlapping rings. The fact that the artist actually took the time to carve these raised, intricate patterns onto the garment, well, that speaks volumes about their dedication to fine, luxurious detail and their super advanced understanding of texture and stone carving.
Next up, Section 3, the Bronze Casting Tradition, Ancient Engineering. Transitioning from carved stone to intense heat, the Indus Valley people pioneered a massive metallurgical operation. And they didn't just dabble in this, they perfected what's known as the lost wax technique. Here's how it works. First, the artist sculpts a figure entirely out of wax. Then they cover that wax figure with a thick coating of clay and let it dry completely. Next, they heat the whole thing up. The wax melts and is carefully drained out through a tiny little hole pierced in the clay. So that leaves a perfectly hollow clay mold. Finally, they pour molten bronze into that hollow space. Once the metal cools and solidifies, they just break away the clay cover to reveal the bronze sculpture. It's a brilliant, multi-step chemical and physical process.
And here is a fact that absolutely blows my mind. Bronze casting techniques of this exact same nature, using this precise lost wax method, did not die out with the Indus cities. They represent a continuous tradition. This very technique is still practiced right now, today, in many parts of India. We are looking at a technological and artistic unbroken chain spanning over 4 millennia. No way, right?
So we've seen the elite soapstone and the highly engineered bronze, but that really begs the question,
what about everyone else? Not everyone had access to precious metals or specialized stone carvers. What materials did the everyday citizens use to express themselves, to worship, or honestly, just to entertain their kids? Let's dive into that in Section 4, Terracotta Figures and Toys, the Art of the People.
Terracotta, or baked clay, was readily available and super accessible. And while these figures are often a bit cruder than the polished stone, they are vibrant, they're full of life, and they hold immense cultural significance. On one hand, we see these rigid, upright religious figures, like the Mother Goddess, representing deep spiritual beliefs. But on the other, we see actual toys. Look at that, it's a toy cart with actual movable wheels. They also made clay whistles, little rattles shaped like birds and animals, and game pieces. This beautiful duality shows they used clay to connect with the divine, sure, but also just to bring joy and playfulness to their children. It just makes them feel incredibly close to us.
Moving to our most mysterious gallery, Section 5, Deciphering the Seals, Ancient Identity Cards. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of these small steatite plaques. Their primary purpose was commercial, basically used to stamp goods for trade, but it really looks like they were also carried on the person, as amulets, functioning almost exactly like modern-day identity cards. Notice the sheer contrast in designs here. The standard seal usually features beautifully realistic animals, like a unicorn or a bull. But then you have the famous Pashupati seal, which is remarkably complex. It depicts a human figure seated cross-legged right in the center, surrounded by an elephant, a tiger, a rhinoceros, and a buffalo, with 2 antelopes beneath the seat. Whether this is a prototype of the god Shiva as lord of animals, or maybe a female deity, its intricate carving is just an absolute masterpiece of miniature art.
But the absolute most crucial point about these seals isn't just the imagery, it's the text. Every standard seal features engravings at the top, carefully cut in with a tiny tool called a burin. This is the Indus Valley script. It's pictographic, which means the symbols represent whole words or concepts rather than just sounds. And here is the greatest enduring mystery of this entire civilization. Despite thousands of examples and decades of study, this script is still totally undeciphered. It's wild to think about. We can see their faces, their toys, their gods, but we still cannot read their words.
Finally, let's step into Section 6, Everyday Art, Pottery, Ornaments.
This is where extreme practicality meets a really deep aesthetic appreciation. Even the most mundane everyday objects were crafted with a keen eye for beauty. Take their pottery, for example. The vast majority of Indus Valley pottery excavated is very fine, wheel-made ware. Handmade pottery is actually quite rare to find here. And while plain red clay pottery is pretty common, they also created these stunning black painted wares, where a fine red slip was coated with geometric and animal designs in glossy black paint. Notice how straight, angular shapes are really the exception here. Graceful curves are the absolute rule. They even crafted these tiny miniature vessels, less than half an inch high, with just marvelous precision.
They were also incredibly innovative when it came to functional design. Check out this perforated pottery. It's got a large hole at the bottom and all these small holes scattered all over the walls. Archaeologists actually believe this specific shape was utilized in Indus households for a very practical reason: straining beverages. It's a fantastic example of an everyday problem solved with a specifically engineered yet visually appealing ceramic tool. Now, when it came to personal adornment, the resources at their disposal were just vast. Harappan men and women absolutely loved to decorate themselves. They utilized everything from precious metals like gold and copper to gemstones and steatite, all the way down to highly accessible, everyday materials like bone, baked clay, and faience. This massive variety is proof that they had a huge network of commercial resources and trade routes to bring all these materials right into their cities to be worked by their jewelers.
And the results of all that craftsmanship? Breathtaking. What you're seeing here are hordes of well-crafted jewelry discovered at sites like Mohenjodaro and Lothal. Both men and women commonly wore necklaces, fillets, armlets, and finger rings. Women also wore girdles, earrings, and anklets. And we're not talking about crude beads here. These are expertly fashioned gold, highly polished semi-precious stones, and perfectly shaped copper bracelets. In fact, at a cemetery found in Farmana, Haryana, the dead were discovered buried still wearing these precise, precious ornaments. They literally carried their love of beauty right into the afterlife.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the grand theme of our explainer today. Whether it's a perfectly cast bronze statue, a deeply carved steatite seal, or just a delicate gold necklace, these objects aren't just dead history trapped behind museum glass. As our source material beautifully puts it regarding their metal casting and sculpture, it shows how the tradition of figure sculpture continued down the ages. The human drive to shape our environment, to create beauty, and to define our identity, it's an unbroken chain, a chain that links us directly back to the people of Harappa and Mohenjodaro.
Which leads me to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. We've just spent all this time analyzing the identity cards, the childhood toys, and the daily coffee cups of a society that lived 4,000 years ago, right? And we've judged their entire sophistication based on what happened to survive in the dirt. So, take a look around your room right now. If your modern identity cards, your favorite childhood toys, and your daily household items somehow survived under the earth for the next 4,000 years, what exact story would they tell the future archaeologists about you? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.